Well, greetings, friends. Yes, tonight we will explore the origins and purpose of Halloween. There is a purpose. And we're going to take some time to gather around our altar and honor our beloved dead in what we like to call a circle of remembrance. And we're going to do a little thing called eurythmy. Has anyone practiced eurythmy? I think we might have got you to do it one time. So it's an art form, it's a movement form where every letter of the alphabet corresponds to an organ in the body, to a planet in the cosmos, to the zodiac. So we're going to tap into that and bring those forces into ourselves. We're going to do a little eurythmy. And then we're going to experience a ritual performance where we will journey to meet Inanna, the queen of heaven and earth, and her sister, Ereshkigal, goddess of the Underworld. So how does that sound? You ready? You ready for that on this Halloween night? So yes, we know that on All Hallows Eve, the veils between the worlds are thin. Yeah. And so what does that mean? It means that the spiritual realm really beckons, and that those from the other side are very close. And so it's a good time to really take advantage of that. And to ask ourselves, do we have the courage to look beyond the mask of the material world into the spirit realm, the place of beginning, the time of our unbornness, the place of our ending when we shuffle off that mortal coil only to begin again and yet again? Because we're striving always for the eternal. But take heart, my friends, because every ending is a new beginning. So at All Hallows Tide, we are standing at a cross quarter. You see, we're in between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. It's a very powerful time when great transformations are possible. And all the power of the worlds are available to us. So we're going to begin by looking at a little history of this universal festival which celebrates death, the big brother of sleep. So really, what is it like to bring awareness to this most important human initiation, this true rite of passage? And we can ask ourselves, can we work consciously to cross the threshold, as we do perhaps when we're learning to meditate, or when we sleep, when we try to have a lucid dream? And ultimately, every one of us will experience this in the life between death and rebirth. So many cultures, I could probably fill up this whole page, celebrate this festival of the dead. And sometimes it lasts 3 days. In the Incan religion, it's a whole month of November. And so I just want to, invite you to think about, do you have a family tradition or a cultural expression? And perhaps if you don't, maybe it's time to start one. This is the perfect time to think about that. So if we go back, all the way back to, as far as ancient Persia and Mesopotamia, Sumeria, we find many initiation myths, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, and the one that we're going to hear tonight, of the descent of the goddess, that describe communicating with the dead and a journey into the underworld. So in ancient Egypt, we find what is called the Book of the Dead. The Tibetans have a Book of the Dead. Maybe you've heard of it. But what's interesting, if you translate it, we think of it as the Book of the Dead, but it actually translates to mean Book of Coming Forth by Day, or Book of Emerging into the Light. So it gives you a different perspective than we might have about death being this final thing. But to them, it's this rebirth into the spiritual world. So I find that to be an interesting way of looking at it. And it is a funeral text that has these vignettes in these hieroglyphs that describe the deceased and their journey in the afterlife. So this book was placed in the coffin or the burial chamber. And basically this book consisted of magic spells that helped these people, these souls of the dead, to find their way in the afterlife, in the duat, which is their word for the underworld. So what's also interesting is that it was written by many, many priests over a period of over 1,000 years. So it's chock full. And if you look into the cosmology of human evolution, which Rudolf Steiner does quite a bit, you see that there are different epochs of human consciousness. And when we were in the Egyptian time, there was a certain way of thinking and certain practices that were done. And this time that we are in now is supposed to be sort of a recapitulation of those times. So we take up some of those things that they were doing then in a new sort of way. And one of the things that we have taken up is this idea of embalming. But it didn't start until the Civil War. Before that, people had natural home funerals where the person died in the house that they probably lived in all their life. They stayed in the bed. They would have the 3-day vigil. It was very, very natural. But with the advent of the Civil War, so many people were dying. And the loved ones wanted to be able to have a funeral for those who had passed. And so this practice of embalming came into vogue. And then it sort of got out of control, didn't it? Now it's sort of taken over and it's this big industry. But there are many people now trying to work toward this idea of green burial, getting back to the basics again. So yes, if we go back to ancient Greece, or I guess we could say go forward from ancient Egypt to ancient Greece, we'll have this story of Demeter and Persephone. And if you remember that circle of the year that we had, you saw that the cross quarter there that we're at. But between the autumn equinox, there's also right across that circle is the spring equinox. So we have this story of Demeter and Persephone also told in the springtime. But at this time of year, Persephone is the queen of the underworld. And it's connected to this secret festival of Thesmophoria. Has anyone ever heard of that? It's kind of a secret thing that the women did. They would dress in white robes, and they would observe a strict chastity before and after the ceremony. And of course, we all know this, the myth, right? Demeter's daughter, Persephone, she was gathering flowers one autumn day when she was taken by Pluto, the god of the underworld, into his subterranean kingdom. Well, these people knew that it wasn't an abduction myth, it wasn't a rape myth, it was a myth of initiation, a myth of learning the rites of death and resurrection. So these women, on the first night of their ceremony, would reenact this as a rite of initiation. And on the second night, the women fasted, and they lowered wild boar, sacred to the goddess Circe, and Hecate, the dark goddess, right, into chasms in the earth as a sacrifice. And then on the third night, they would take bones from former festivals and they would place them on an altar and mix them with the seed corn, which was then sown in the fields, a sort of magic fertilizer, right, to ensure a good crop. Sort of the first biodynamic preparation, right? You've heard of biodynamics. So then they would have a big feast. And they would also cast herbs on their beds and sit on the ground to promote fertility. So, yeah, this festival was very sacred, very solemn, but there was a lot of very bawdy jokes in the style of the crone Babo. Has anyone heard of Babo? She is a wild crone. Yeah, she considered the goddess of mirth. And in the myth, she had a special role, because Demeter, she was just bereft with the fact that she had lost her daughter. And so she wasn't doing her job. She wasn't bringing the fertility to the earth. And so the gods got quite upset. And the humans were very upset. The gods were upset because no one was making any offerings to them, right? Because there was nothing growing on the earth. So they sent Babo in, right? This crazy crone. And she lifted up her skirts and she told these bawdy jokes. And she got Demeter to smile. And that brought her back. And she was able to be cheered up and do her job again. So this brought the fertility back to earth. And of course, the Romans, they had a similar festival in honor of Circes. And also, if you look at the Eleusinian mysteries, we see initiation rites enacted to gain inspiration. Again, looking into what do the gods have to say? What do the ancestors have to say? Hi, Mira. Welcome. So people really connecting up with their ancestors. And again, this idea of initiation, which is very important, especially this time of year when the veils are so thin. And I wanted to bring up, we could talk a whole series of lectures about the Native American peoples. We could do a whole series of things about the Aztecs, etc. But I really wanted to, but because these people really worked with their ancestors all year round. But I wanted to specifically bring up this idea of the ghost dance movement, which started in the 1800s and influenced many, many different communities, particularly the Sioux. And it was created in the time of genocide. So this dance called in the spirits of the dead to help them drive the colonists out of their lands. And I don't know if you know the history of Wounded Knee, but in December of 1888, I'm not much about dates and stuff like that, but when you hear a date, 1888, there was a lot going on in Europe, right? Madame Blavatsky was doing all kinds of things. It was a very magical time for the Western mystery traditions. But here in America, we have this wonderful story of this medicine man who became sick with a fever during an eclipse of the sun. So at this time, he had a vision of the Supreme Being who warned him to tell all the native peoples to try to live an honest life, to shun the ways of the white man, especially the consumption of alcohol, calling for prayer and singing and dancing as an alternative to mourning the dead. So, interesting thing to think about. Instead of mourning the dead, we dance. We dance for them to celebrate their lives. And so each nation sort of adapted this ghost dance way in their own particular style. But yes, at Wounded Knee, it was invaded, of course, by the 7th Cavalry, and they came and massacred these unarmed Lakota people, primarily women, children, and the elderly. So, yeah. Many communities still practice this ghost dance today, but it's usually in secret. So now we come to Ireland. Ireland, my favorite place, right? And this is really kind of the modern take on Halloween that we sort of know about, with these origins stemming back from ancient Celtic and pagan rituals in a festival called Samhain. Now, this translates from the Celtic to mean end of summer or end of the light half of the year. So yeah, even today in America, you might find a couple witches around town nowadays. And in southern England, of course, Ireland, Scotland celebrate Halloween with rituals, bonfires, games, traditional foods like bambrach. Anybody hear of that? An Irish fruitcake, which contains coins and buttons and rings for fortune telling, right? So if you get a coin in your slice of cake, what do you think that might mean? You're going to be rich in your next year. That's right. If you get a ring, you're going to get married. It could be, because the veils are thin and anything could happen. And it most certainly will. Yes, because we can speak and break those barriers down. This is a time for divination. So if you go home, you might want to ask some questions, and we're going to do a little bit of that with our ritual tonight. So yes, another very, very popular, right, in Mexico, Latin America, here in America, people get together. They honor those who've passed away. And this is something I didn't know, that they believe that the gates of heaven actually open up at midnight tonight. And the souls of children return to earth to be reunited with their families for 24 hours. And that on November 1st, it's the souls of the adults who come down to join in the festivities. And then on November 2nd, that's the saints. They get a chance to come in too. So, yeah, this holiday celebrated with altars full of these beautiful pictures of their beloved loved ones, their favorite foods, sugar skulls, pan de morta, the bread of the dead. So they leave these offerings for these weary ghosts. And of course, for the souls of the children, they put toys and candy, while the adults, they get the cigarros and the mezcal. Yeah. So in Africa, just like the Native American peoples, they are working with the dead all the time. They are known that these ancestors watch over their living relatives and intercede for them, along with all the other divine spirits. So they often feed the dead and these deities with elaborate ceremonies. So these celebrations are a communion between the living and the spiritual world in which the dead live. So yeah, in the Hindu tradition, it's believed that when a person dies, Yama, the god of death, takes their soul to purgatory, where they will find the last 3 generations of their family. And during this festival of Pitri Paksha, which lasts for 15 days, the souls, again, we see a similarity. They are briefly allowed to return to earth to be with their families. But interesting that in order to guarantee the living their place in the afterlife, the head of the house must perform a very elaborate fire ritual. And they believe that if it isn't done, their soul will wander the earth for eternity. And the Chinese, many Buddhists, conduct a similar ceremony in the autumn, a 2-week hungry ghost festival. So according to tradition, the departed who have no living descendants to feed them become hungry. Hungry ghosts. So during this festival, food is offered to these ghosts who are represented by lamps made out of lotus flowers, and they're carried in the streets at dusk. And so we see the Feast of Lanterns, the Japanese Day of the Dead. And this is another example of families celebrating this cyclical nature of life and death. It's part of the process of life, right? They remember their ancestors. And yes, the departed souls return home on this day and are offered food and entertainment. They sing to them, right? They play music for them. Special ceremonies set up in the household. Lanterns are placed in the entryway so they can find their way home. And they put them in bodies of water to direct the dead. Now, the Catholic Church took over a Roman festival for the Day of the Dead, Feralia, which used to be in February. So they transferred it to the 1st of November. You know, that's kind of a common Catholic thing to do, is sort of to take these pagan holidays and sort of transpose their own deities on them, right? Just kind of keep it going in their own way. Things change. So yeah, but the Catholic All Hallows really started to carry this certain fear-based belief around death, bringing the kind of feeling that we have nowadays for Halloween, where, you know, that we're quite familiar with, connected with the powers of evil. And we know that the full moon in October is called the blood moon. It's called the blood moon not because it's red, folks. It's because it's also called the hunter's moon. Because, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. After the breeding season and before it starts snowing like it did today, you know, many of these creatures would just die off anyway. So they were taken for the cooking pot to supplement what otherwise might be a kind of a meager winter diet. So with all this death around, it's not surprising that human death was also people's thoughts sort of turned to that as well. And then in the Middle Ages, the poor would go to the wealthy homes, offering to pray for the recently departed, to help them in their journey in the afterlife. And as a token of their appreciation, the rich would give them food and beer. Good deal, huh? And so the visitors, they would show up holding lanterns of hollowed out turnips with glowing candles inside. You have to remember that the pumpkin wasn't really given to us until the Native Americans gave it to us, right? So they didn't have pumpkins in Europe so much. They used these turnips. And the light inside represented the soul in purgatory. So yeah, church masses were held so that the souls didn't feel neglected and come and haunt believers. No, can't have that. And yes, there were costumes, masks, and mummers' plays. Yeah, so in these mummers' plays, elaborate scenes where they would really show the various stages of the afterlife. Quite fascinating. But after the Protestant Reformation, which can be traced back to a different October 31st event in 1517, so that's 502 years ago, Martin Luther put up his 95 treatises, right? That was kind of a big thing in history, sort of changed the way the Christian religion was thought of, gave a little bit more freedom. And so this idea that souls could be petitioned or paid for with prayers kind of lost its popularity with these new denominations. And by the 1840s, we're just moving right along here, folks, there was a wave of Irish and Scottish immigrants, and they brought their customs to the U.S. So it was basically a pagan, secular pastime. And the young people went souling. That's what they called it. And they danced outside the tenements in exchange for gifts. And the costumes were made out of old clothes, and the faces were painted with chalk or burnt cork. While tricks were things like stuffing cabbages in chimneys and whacking each other with bags of flour, fun things like that. So, but you have to remember that the Irish Catholics were really quite, there was a lot of prejudice against them. They were not accepted in America for quite a long time. But when the celebration was pretty much stripped of its Catholic underpinning, then it quickly became really quite popular. So, the early 1900s, as these immigrants really began to assimilate, the newspapers started to report this custom trending around high schools and college students and Rotary clubs who began to throw Halloween parties. And by the 1930s, North America had a new term for that old tradition of souling, and now they called it trick-or-treating. So it was the very first time, you see this Saturday Evening Post, it was the first time that this new phrase was given out sort of in public. And it's kind of interesting to look at history, right? Because 1929 was the big stock market crash. So there was this real pool of okay, let's put on the happy face and, Mickey Mouse and, all of that kind of stuff. But when you look at Orson Welles and that War of Worlds radio show, that really, all of that fear that was underlying the people really came up. And that was a big deal. But of course, the Celts, they were holding the essence there. And they called their All Hallows Eve or Samhain their New Year. So it's the same with the Jewish people and their New Year, Rosh Hashanah. So at the end of the holy days was this festival called Sukkot. So it's an agricultural feast. It has to do with harvesting. So it's sort of like their Thanksgiving celebration. But they would build this hut out in the middle of the fields because they would be out there sowing and harvesting. But they would have these beautiful ceremonies where they would invite their ancestors to come in, and they would honor the elemental beings and thank them for the wonderful harvest. And also, it's the Islamic New Year. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense, when you think about it, to let the old year die away like the plant life does during this transition into the dark and welcome in the new. So it's also a tradition to look toward the future. So in my house, we like to dress up as what we want to be for the new year. Might want to try that. So we can ask ourselves, what do you want to be? Who do you want to become? But here in America, things are, a little bit more gruesome. So, but I've been thinking about this for obviously many years, and I think there's a psychology going on with us. There always is, and we could sit here for a long time talking about that. But to me, I think it's like this idea that Halloween calls for an integration, an interaction with spooky strangers, right, that come out of the night, knocking on our door, shouting, "Give me a treat," or "You'll get a trick." So on this spiritual level, trick-or-treat can be seen as a demand that strangers, which is a symbol of the unfamiliar parts of ourselves, give up their gifts to us. Because you know what? There's a lot of energy that gets locked up in the dark. And Halloween is an opportunity to dialogue with that hidden side of ourselves, that shadow side that really wants to be embraced. Can we call that energy back from those parts of ourselves? And really, when you think about it, light and dark are not opposites, but two parts of the same cycle. So in order to truly appreciate the festivals of light that return with the winter solstice, we must first grow in the dark womb of our perennial inward journey. Because, like I said, with the veils between the worlds so thin, so much is possible for our transformation. And it's not only the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds that thin, it can be the division between any two polarities, like the left and right hemisphere of the brain, for instance. Or any two realities that are, struggling to coexist, like war and peace, for instance. Truth and lies, for instance. So can we really use this time to create a resolution of paradox? And, this respectful meeting of the different sides of the same coin that can truly initiate a healing transformation. That's calling out for us right now. And we can't really do that. We can't let the light back into our lives until we've come to understand that dark part of ourselves. We have to take responsibility for that. So then we can hopefully negotiate a smart new treaty with our dark side. Just think of all the energy we can get back from that if we do. And when we do that, we can start to ask questions like, who have I been? Who am I now? Where am I going? What do I want to become? So these are the kind of questions that we can ask our beloved dead. So we're gonna do that right now. We're gonna get together. I'm gonna ask you to make a little circle around our altar over there, and we're gonna do a little eurythmy. And we're gonna have a circle of remembrance. And then tonight, when you go home, right before you go to sleep, you might bring those questions. You might bring those questions into your sleep. What do you think? Wonderful. So we're going to just try to have a little bit of a breathing process now. We're going to try to feel, I know we're a little bit close, but let's just feel our backspace. We can't see what's behind us, but we can trust that there is something there, right? And that can help us to stand in our uprightness. And we could feel that we are a conduit from the above to the below. And we could feel that in our backspace, our beloved dead are there. They're there in the spiritual world, and we could feel them supporting us. So just feel that backspace. You might want to just step back into it a little bit. Just lean into that just a little bit. And then I want you to all come forward. Let's come forward as much as we can. Bring your neighbor with you. Bring your neighbor with. Can we come forward? Yeah, a little bit more. So we're coming in. We're breathing it all inside. Yeah. And then we take it back out. Yeah. We're going to take it back out to them who have given us so much. And so we feel that we've come from spirit to matter. Come with me into matter. From matter to spirit. Let's take it back to spirit. Let's try that one more time. I know it's a little bit, we're not moving much, but you can feel an inward movement. So from spirit to matter. Here we go. And bring your neighbors with. From matter to spirit. As above, so below. Let's bring it in. As within, so without. As the universe, so the soul. We are one. Good. So you can see we've made a little chalice here, haven't we? We've made a vessel for our loved ones to come. They're here already. They're here. So let's just take a moment now to honor them. If you feel like just speaking out a name of somebody that you want to connect with, someone that you want to honor, we can just, all of us, look into the fire, look into the candle, and we can speak the name of those who are aligned with love and light, those we want to connect with, those we want to bring healing to, those we want to honor. And we'll just take a moment here to do that. And even if we don't speak their names, they're speaking in us now. They're speaking through our breath. And we'll just offer them this little song here. The words are up on the thing there, but hopefully I'll remember them, and you can just jump in whenever you feel like it. It's kind of an old-time pagan song. Some of you might know it. Corn and grain, all that falls shall rise again. Hoof and horn, all that dies shall be reborn. Human being, all that love shall bring healing. Corn and grain, all that falls shall rise again. Hoof and horn, all that dies shall be reborn. Human being, all that love shall bring healing. Corn and grain, all that falls shall rise again. Hoof and horn, all that dies shall be reborn. Human being, all that love shall bring healing. Thank you. Good.
Very nice.
Okay. But you have homework tonight before you go to bed. You'll take those questions into your sleep. Okay? So now I'll ask you to take your seats again, and we're going to hear the descent of the goddess. You ready for her? It's going to be intense. Okay. Thank you. So this story of the descent of the goddess, which comes from the land of Sumeria, a place that today we call Iraq, just a smidge northwest of Kuwait, where the Tigris and the Euphrates meet. Real hotbed, right? Some people think of it as the cradle of civilization. So this ancient myth reveals the archetype of the soul in the spiritual world. Now, in the very first line we hear, "From the great above, she set her ear to the great below." And what's interesting is that the word for ear and the word for wisdom in Sumeria have the same root. Something to think about. Most translations say mind is what is meant. But to literalize the text as ear really opens up, pardon the pun, the imagination and sets the story's direction. So Inanna opens or sets her ear to the spirit world. So one can imagine she's tilting her ear toward the depths, poised to an inner listening, straining to hear those who have crossed the threshold. We have to work a little bit to hear them. But the human ear, it's like a womb. It's a labyrinth with secret tunnels and passageways, right? The ear is like the womb. It's like the tomb, receptive, receiving and holding this vital state of inherent potentiality. So opening the ear to something new is, in fact, an annunciation. We hear that word in association with the Blessed Virgin Mary, right? She was, the Archangel Gabriel spoke into her ear and she conceived. So this idea of a deep listening that gestates this deeper meaning of life, prefiguring a noble fate. So when we truly hear the call and heed the call of our fate, then we can answer the call. So in this ancient truth of this myth, Inanna, the Sumerian goddess of love and light, hears the groans of her sister Ereshkigal, goddess of the underworld. So Inanna, she's the queen of heaven and earth, right? She knows everything, except she doesn't understand the dark side, right? She doesn't understand that supersensible world. So she follows her destiny into initiation and consciously takes the journey into the realm beyond the threshold. A sacrifice that leads to transformation and allows the reuniting of the undiscovered and rejected parts of herself, symbolized by her dark sister Ereshkigal. So Inanna's journey takes her through 7 gates. We can call these, in anthroposophy, we call them the 7 planetary spheres, where she must stop to put her life experiences into perspective from the point of view of the other. So Inanna cannot follow the call of relinquishment without giving something up, right? The ways of the spirit world are reversed. The rules are different. So not even this goddess of heaven and earth can enter the kingdom. She can't go there with materialistic trappings. So Inanna, like all who are striving for initiation, like all who die, are opened, exposed, left to the nogredo state of, that's an alchemical term, right? She's told by the guardian, quiet Inanna, the ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned. But through her transformation, this indeed may change. We can change the world, folks, if we change ourselves. So before her journey, she fortifies herself with the royal power inherent in each one of her 7 chakras, represented by 7 royal jewels and the 7 colors of the rainbow, 7, very mystic number, yeah? And she has to discard these, though, at each one of these gates. So again, in the language of anthroposophy, we can say that these are centers where the planetary beings dwell within us. But, my friends, the 7 gates to the underworld are narrow, and she must leave behind her vestiges of power, with all the karma attached in order to enter. So in this expanded yet stripped down state, she faces her sister, her double, Ereshkigal. And this helps to work through this karma that lies buried in the undeveloped will. So out of this alchemical process, empathy is born. So this compassionate part of Inanna takes to heart her sister's travails of painful labor She hears her pain and names it back to her. So this is the action of wisdom, right? If we truly listen and we hear somebody's pain, they feel heard, and then something can change, something can shift. So this brings her redemption as well as her own. And this gives her back her gifts, and these gifts are then renewed. And so then she's ready for a fresh, new incarnation. And so, dear friends, let us open our ear to the descent of Inanna. From the great above, she set her ear to the great below. From the great below, the goddess opened her ear to the great below. Our Lady abandoned heaven and earth to descend to the spirit world. Inanna looked beyond heaven and earth to ascend to the spirit world. She abandoned her temple to descend to the underworld. She gathered together the 7 May, the 7 blessings of power. She took them into her hands, and with the 7 May in her possession, she prepared herself. She placed the holy crown of the temple on her head. She arranged the dark locks of hair across her forehead to adorn her 3rd eye. She tied the small lapis beads round her neck, and from her mouth she vibrated the vowel, "Let him come, let him come," to let the double strand of beads fall to her breast, opening her heart, self, with the Ankh. She slipped the ring of gold over her finger as she wrapped the royal robe round her furnace, anointing herself with musk and holy oils, fitting her sandals with wings. She took the ruby measuring rod and line in her hand. And so it was that Inanna set out for the spirit world. Ninshabar, her faithful servant, went with her. Inanna spoke to her, saying, "Ninsubar, my constant support, my soul sister, who gives me wise advice, my warrior who fights by my side, I am descending to the Kur, to the underworld. If I do not return, set up a lament for me. I will not return untouched. Beat the drum for me in the assembly places. Circle the houses of the gods. Speak for me with your eyes. Sing to me with your mouth. Remember me to my people. Dress yourself in a single garment and act out my sacrifice. Then, if you must, go to the temple of Anil. When you enter his holy shrine, cry out, 'Oh, Father Anil, do not let your daughter be stuck in death in the underworld. Do not let your bright silver be covered in dust in the underworld. Do not let your precious lapis be broken into grit for the stoneworker. Do not let your fragrant boxwood be cut into scraps for the woodworker. Do not let your holy priestess of heaven be stuck in death in the underworld. If Anil will not help you, go to the temple of Nana. Weep before Father Nana. If Nana will not help you, go to the temple of Inki. Weep before Mother Inki. Mother Inki, the goddess of wisdom, knows the food of life. She knows the water of life, knows the secret of life. Surely she will not let me die the second death. Inanna continued on her way to the spirit world. Then she stopped and said, "Go now, Ninsabur. Do not forget the words that I have commanded you." When Inanna arrived at the outer gates of the underworld, she knocked loudly. She cried out in a fierce voice, "Open the door, Geti! Open the door! I alone would enter." Neti, the chief gatekeeper of the Kur, asked, "Who are you?" She answered, "I am Inanna, Queen of Heaven, on my way to the west." Neti said, "If you are truly Inanna, Queen of Heaven, on your way to the west, why has your heart led you on the road from which no traveler returns untouched?" Inanna answered, "I would know the spirit world. I have opened my ear and heard the moans of my older sister, Ereshkigal. Her husband, the Bull of Heaven, has died. I have come to witness the funeral rites. Let the beer of his funeral rites be poured into the cup. Let it be done." Neti spoke, "Stay here, Inanna. I will speak to my queen. I will give her your message." Neti, the chief gatekeeper of the Kur, entered the palace of Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, and said, "My queen, a maid as tall as heaven and as wide as earth, as strong as the foundations of the city wall, waits outside the palace gates. She has gathered together the 7 May. She has taken them in her hands, and with the May in her possession, she has prepared herself. On her head, she wears the holy crown of the temple. Across her forehead, her dark locks are carefully arranged. Around her neck, she wears the small lapis beads that vibrate the vow, 'Let him come, let him come.' At her breast, she wears the ankh. Her body is wrapped in the royal robe. On her finger, she wears the golden ring. On her feet, the winged sandals. And in her hand, she carries the ruby measuring rod and line." When Ereshkigal heard this, she slapped her thigh and bit her lip. She took the matter into her heart and dwelt on it. Then she spoke, "Come, Neti, my chief gatekeeper of the Kur. Heed my words. Bolt the 7 gates of the underworld. Then one by one, open each gate a crack. Let Inanna enter. As she enters, remove her royal garments. Let the holy princess of heaven enter bowed low, that she may know my pain." Neti heeded the words of his queen. He bolted the 7 gates of the underworld. Then he opened the outer gate, and he said to the maid, "Come, Inanna, enter." When she entered the first gate, from her head the royal crown of the temple was removed. Inanna asked, "What is this?" She was told, "Quiet, Inanna, the ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." When she entered the second gate, from her forehead her hair was removed. Inanna asked, "What is this?" She was told, "Quiet, Inanna, the ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." She entered the third gate. From her neck The small lapis beads were removed. Inanna asked, "What is this?" She was told, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." When she entered the fourth gate, from her breast the ankh was removed. Inanna asked, "What is this?" She was told, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." When she entered the fifth gate, from her furnace the royal robe was removed. Inanna asked, "What is this?" She was told, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." When she entered the sixth gate, from her finger the gold ring was removed, and the perfume wiped away. Inanna asked, "What is this?" She was told, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." When she entered the seventh gate, from her feet the winged sandals were removed. Inanna asked, "What is this?" She was told, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." Naked and bowed low, Inanna entered Ereshkigal's throne room. Queen Ereshkigal rose. Inanna started toward her throne, but the Inanna, the judges of the underworld, surrounded her. They held up a mirror and passed judgment against her. Then Ereshkigal fastened on Inanna the eye of death. She spoke against her the word of wrath. She uttered against her the cry of guilt. The truth of her unbalance struck her dead. Inanna was turned into a corpse, a piece of rotting meat, and was hung from a hook on the wall. When, after 3 days and 3 nights, Inanna had not returned, Ninsubar set up a lament for her by the ruins. She beat the drum for her in the assembly places. She circled the houses of the gods. She spoke of Inanna with her eyes. She sang to Inanna with her mouth. She remembered Inanna to her people. She dressed herself in a single garment and acted out Inanna's sacrifice. Alone, she set out for the temple of Enlil. When she entered his holy shrine, she cried out, "Oh, grandfather Enlil, do not let your daughter be stuck in death in the underworld. Do not let your bright silver be covered in dust in the underworld. Do not let your precious lapis be broken into grit for the stoneworker. Do not let your fragrant boxwood be cut into scraps for the woodworker. Do not let the holy priestess of heaven be stuck in death in the underworld." Father Enlil answered angrily, "My daughter craved the great above. Inanna craved the great below. She who receives the May of the underworld does not return. She who goes to the dark city stays there." Father Enlil would not help. Ninsubar went to the temple of Nana. When she entered his holy shrine, she cried out, "Oh, Father Nana, do not let your daughter be stuck in death in the underworld. Do not let your bright silver be covered in dust in the underworld. Do not let your precious lapis be broken into grit for the stoneworker. Do not let your fragrant boxwood be cut into scraps for the woodworker. Do not let the holy priestess of heaven be stuck in death in the underworld. Father Inanna answered angrily, my daughter craved the great above. Inanna craved the great below. She who receives the May of the underworld does not return. She who goes to the dark city stays there. Father Inanna would not help. Ninsubar went to the temple of Inki. When she entered the holy shrine, she cried out, "Oh, Mother Inki, do not let your daughter be stuck in death in the underworld. Do not let your bright silver be covered in dust in the underworld. Do not let your precious lapis be broken into grit for the stoneworker. Do not let your fragrant boxwood be cut into scraps for the woodworker. Do not let the holy priestess of heaven be stuck in death in the underworld." Mother Inki said, "What has happened? What has my daughter done? Inanna, queen of all the lands, holy priestess of heaven, what has happened? I am troubled. I am grieved. What can we do?" From under her fingernail, Mother Inki brought forth dirt. She fashioned the dirt into a kugara, a creature neither male nor female. From under the fingernail of her other hand, she brought forth dirt. She fashioned the dirt into a kugala, a creature neither male nor female. She gave the food of life to the kugara. She gave the water of life to the kugala, saying, "Go, dear creatures, into the underworld. Enter the doors like flies." Ereshkigal, the queen of the underworld, is moaning with the cries of a woman about to give birth. No linen is spread on her body. Her breasts are uncovered. Her hair swirls about her head like leeks. When she cries, "Oh, oh, my inside," cry also, "Oh, oh, your inside." When she cries, "Oh, oh, my outside," cry also, "Oh, oh, my outside." The queen will be pleased. She will offer you a gift. Ask her only for the corpse that hangs from a hook on the wall. One of you will sprinkle the food of life on it. The other will sprinkle the water of life on it. Inanna will arise. The kugara and the kugala heeded Inki's words. They set out for the underworld. Like flies, they slipped through the cracks of the gates. They entered the throne room of the queen of the underworld. No linen was spread on her body. Her breasts were uncovered. Her hair swirled around her head like leeks. Inanna was moaning. "Oh, oh, my inside." They moaned. "Oh, oh, your inside." She moaned, "Oh, oh, my outside." They moaned, "Oh, oh, your outside." She groaned, "Oh, oh, my belly." They groaned, "Oh, oh, your belly." She groaned, "Oh, oh, my back." They groaned, "Oh, oh, your back." She cried, "Ah, ah, my liver." They cried, "Ah, ah, my liver." She sighed, "Ah, ah, my heart." They sighed, "Ah, ah, your heart." Ereshkigal stopped. She looked at them. She asked, "Who are you? Moaning, groaning, sighing with me. If you are gods, I will bless you. If you are mortals, I will give you a gift. I will give you the water gift, the river in its fullness. The Kugara and the Kugala answered, we do not wish it. Ereshkigal said, speak then, what do you wish? They answered, we wish only for the corpse that hangs from a hook on the wall. Ereshkigal said, the corpse belongs to Inanna. They said, that is what we wish. The corpse was given to them. The Kugara sprinkled the food of life on the corpse. The Kugala sprinkled the water of life. Inanna rose. Inanna was about to ascend from the underworld when the Anua, the judges of the underworld, seized her. They said, no one ascends from the underworld unmarked. But Ereshkigal, after having been heard, had given birth, and she was changed and wished to know more about the life above, that she might be awake to the above and the below like her sister. She spoke her wish to Inanna. I will release you if you come to the underworld half the year, and I, your sister, will stay in the other half. On the day you are called, that day you will be taken. On the day Inanna is called, that day Ereshkigal will be set free. The sisters embraced, and great was Inanna's rejoicing in her chance to rule as queen of the underworld. When the midnight hour had passed, and Inanna was called to return, Neti, the chief gatekeeper of the Kur, asked, who are you? I am one to be reborn, replied the queen. So Inanna was led back through the dark into the light. She passed through the 7th gate, and on her feet the winged sandals were restored. Inanna asked, what is this? She was told, this you now know. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They must be questioned. She passed through the 6th gate, and on her finger the golden ring was restored. Inanna asked, what is this? She was told, this you now know. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They must be questioned. She passed through the 5th gate, and the robe to her furnace was restored. Inanna asked, what is this? She was told, this you now know. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They must be questioned. She passed through the 4th gate, and the ankh to her breast was restored. Inanna asked, what is this? She was told, this you now know. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They must be questioned. She passed through the 3rd gate, and on her neck the small lapis beads were restored. Inanna asked, what is this? She was told, this you now know. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They must be questioned. She passed through the 2nd gate, and on her forehead the locks of hair over her 3rd eye were restored. Inanna asked, what is this? She was told, this you now know. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They must be questioned. She passed through the 1st gate, and on her head the royal crown of the temple was restored. Inanna asked, what is this? She was told, this you now know. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They must be questioned. Inanna, the initiate queen, now had a new name and was restored. The gate was opened from the great above to the great below, and from the great below to the great above. The gate is open to all who can proclaim, Holy Inanna, great is your sacrifice. Holy Ereshkigal, divine are your secrets shared. Holy Ereshkigal, sister of Inanna, I sing your praises. And what was divided was united in the great above and in the great below. And so it is. Yeah, I think it really is this idea of really thinking about the past, living into the present moment, really sort of, it's almost like what you would do at New Year's time, right? Because the Celtic people really think of it as a New Year celebration. So you look back at what you've done, and you say, okay, that worked, that didn't work so well. I'm going to keep these seeds. I'm going to plant those next time. Well, those didn't work out so much. Maybe I'm just going to compost that, or I'm going to burn away that stuff that doesn't serve. This is a really good time. The harvest metaphor is really important, to sort of take that in. And, we're harvesting ourselves, right? We're developing ourselves. We're like a tree. So, are the roots really stable? Do our branches reach out and embrace others? What is our fruit like? Yeah? So we can think about all these things and then decide, well, maybe I'm not going to be a pear tree anymore. I want to be an apple tree. Okay. So then what do I got to do? Right? Well, there's work to do. And we can't forget that our ancestors, the people that we love, that are on the other side, just because they don't have bodies anymore, just because they're back here and we can't see them, doesn't mean they're still not working with us. A lot of times we wake up in the morning and we have a thought and we think it's coming from us, when really it might be inspired into us from somebody who's trying to help us. So can we be open to that a little bit and be grateful? And these traditions that we try to talk about where people give offerings and such, that's not a bad idea, right? Just to remember somebody, oh yeah, my mom, Betty May, she loved Mars bars. She just loved those. No, actually, she loved mounds. Mounds bars, sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. So I'm going to go home and get her one, and then I can eat it and, think of her. So things like that are just little ways of connecting.